Hello, my friends! Welcome to the channel. I am Nicole, and I do live here in India. And today I am with my very good friend Laurence.
Hello.
She is my friend from France. She is my French connection and my bestie from the Westie. And she is here today to help me watch a video from Max Chernov.
Okay.
He is one of our favorites. If you don't know already, I actually did an interview with Max, and if you have not seen it, I will link it up here at the top. And this video is why so many people get India wrong. An American point of view. Not mine, but somebody's.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we have a French point of view, one that we could watch. We should see if he's got any French people.
Maybe we can check
point of view. But let's see what this guy has to say. You know, we've been here for a really long time, and a lot of the times, you know, these. Well, I shouldn't say this with Max, but because a lot of the interviews that he does, he actually gets people that have lived in places for a long time, like myself, you know. So I'm not sure how long this gentleman has lived in India, but a lot of the times when we see point of view about India, it's from expats that have been here just very short amount of time, and a lot of times they either, you know, they can get it right, but some of it's wrong. We don't always agree is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, they carry on stereotypes.
Yeah, there's stereotypes, or they've just been here, or they haven't, you know, it takes a while. Like once you live here, like, you have to really live here for some time to really, I think, see India.
And it depends who you interact with. If you're if you're an expat who stays with other expats, then it's
you really only see one point of view. Yeah. You really need to be able to interact with India, yeah? And not everybody does. So let's go ahead and see what his point of view is and whether or not we agree. We will make up our judgment, and we'll see. If you haven't already, please give me your like. Please give me your subscribe, and let's go.
Some of the comments I've read, I've been to India, it's the dirtiest place I've ever been, and I never go back. Are you kidding? Like, I mean, most Indians keep their homes immaculately and beautifully.
Meet Jeff Goldberg, an American film director who's been living in India for almost 15 years.
Oh, 15 years. Okay, yeah. So you said it's the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would have to agree.
I mean, people who are tourists will not go into
a home.
So they have no idea. It's just what they see outside.
Yeah. I have had the same comments on my videos, particularly the interview that I did with Max, how India is so dirty, etc. You know, there are parts of India that are definitely, you know, need help, you know, and one of them is the trash organization and pickup, etc. But, you know, that is continuously getting better, and different cities have different standards, I think. So it really can depend on where you go to in India. And I mean, inside, generally, Indian homes are very clean. So I would have to agree with that. So this guy has been almost 15 years. Let's see what his point of view is.
Where he runs his own acting studio. Jeff shares common prejudices about India in America, how to understand India if you're not from there, and whether the caste system affects foreigners who live in India. I'm Max Chernov, your insider to Expat Life. Ciao!
Especially for Americans, especially Americans my age or my generation, easily the worst thing to ever happen was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. You know, because that film is so incredibly prejudiced and just straight up, to use modern nomenclature, unwoke, you know.
Okay, I loved Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So did my husband. Like, is it give off maybe bad India vibes? I don't know. I mean, what did you think? Do you remember that movie?
No, I don't. So, no.
I loved Indiana Jones, but I mean, it's a movie. It's, you know, not real. That actor, though, actually, I think took a lot of flack for taking that role. That was an Indian actor, very well known. And I can understand why it didn't go down well here in India. I'm not saying that it, you know, gave a real good projection of India, but it was a movie, you know. I have to, you know, that's all of the Indiana Jones movies are crazy.
I've always wanted to say to Steven Spielberg, so Steven, if you're listening, I want to ask you a question, which is, why would you take easily one of the greatest cuisines in the world, Indian food, and make a mockery of it in that scene when they're eating dinner at the Maharaja's palace. I've never understood that, because it's like there are so many things that India is known for, but certainly one of them that it's globally recognized for is how absolutely delicious and stunningly good and diverse Indian food is.
It's not Indian food. I mean, it is a movie. I guess I hate to
just
go back.
Stop.
Yeah.
Let it play.
Oh, let it play. Oh, I'm annoying you. I'm sorry.
And suddenly to have this Maharaja scene, which is totally like just stereotyped and upside down, is really, really, really strange. And even people say, oh, you know, but Jeff, they're in the Temple of Doom Palace. So of course they'd eat the snake surprise and eyeball soup. But it's like, wait, even in the village, you have them eating like bugs in the food and stuff. And I can tell you one thing, and I mean this with all the respect it deserves, is no matter where you eat in India, you will eat clean, good food. People take that very, very seriously. Even people at the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, you know, you eat really nice stuff. It might be simple, but it will definitely be yummy. So I've always wondered why he did that. Anyway, yeah, so sometimes you have to debunk rumors and ideas like that. Americans are it's a very insular country, as much as it doesn't think it is, as much as it thinks it's a global player, and it is a global player on the world stage in terms of its foreign affairs and, of course, its military. But the average American isn't the most worldly person, for better or worse, and that's not a criticism.
We're not the most worldly people? Shocking.
No comment.
This just seems to be a fact. And when they come outside of that bubble, the expectations that they come with are often things they learned on television or in the media that probably are either A, old news, antiquated, or maybe just straight up wrong. You have to sort of debunk some of that stuff along the way, you know. Like, for instance, some of the comments I've read in yours and my chats is, you know, I've been to India, it's the dirtiest place I've ever been, and I never go back. You know, look, I mean, I can't sit here and say that India doesn't have some sanitary issues, but at the same time, like, are you kidding? Like, I mean, most Indians keep their homes immaculately and beautifully, and the vast majority of people have folks come in and clean each day for them. So to sit there and say it's a dirty place is a false narrative, and when you label it like that and you make that general sort of statement, you diminish a truth, and that's unfortunate. And then you propagate that truth and you allow that truth to become fact. And unfortunately, that might actually dissuade people from wanting to come here and see what it's like. And I would never, ever, ever do that. I think that's a terrible thing to do to any country or culture. Well, I think you got to get on the ground and see it for yourself and make your own judgments.
Why do you think there are so many like misconceptions that I personally see, like in the media, in YouTube comments, some different type of stereotypes about India, like spreading around?
I'll be honest. There's a wonderful book by a French doctor from the 1950s, 40s, 50s, and 60s named Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was a doctor born in the French West Indies in Martinique, and he wrote a book about his experiences when he moved to the metropolitan part of France, which is European France, and then his experiences as a medical doctor and psychiatrist during the Algerian War in northern Africa. And the book, The Wretched of the Earth, is about the colonial mindset and the experience of the colonized through a psychological lens, and speaking about how they feel, the violence, the degradation, the racism, the bigotry they dealt with, and how that has manifested itself in the Algerian context into the FLN, which was fighting the French to get them out of Algeria, and the violence that incurred. It's a wonderful book, and I think it's a very important book for people to read today because, you know, when you look around at the situation in the world, you can still find a lot of truisms or paradigms that would be important to recognize. That said, coming over to India, look, there are thinkers on the left and the right political side of the spectrum here, from the current foreign minister, Jay Shankar, to the Congress politician, Shashi Tharoor, who talk about the colonial experience in India. And there really is no way to understand modern India without at least having a recognition of the colonial lens. And so much of the pedestrian view of India is without a doubt mixed up in that colonial view. And sadly, unfortunately, and pathetically, even this many years since the end of British rule, a lot of it is just racist. It is, I'm sorry. And I know that that's going to be something that's going to light off a lot of comments for people because, of course, I'm not calling anyone a racist. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that prejudicial thinking is the result of not knowing and coming to a conclusion about something without having the full picture, or at least enough information to make a wise, informed, at the very least educated guess.
So what I would say to this is that a lot of it is unconscious bias. So they've grown up with it. It's not in your face racism, but it is a bias that's there. And a lot of times it's there. I mean, it's called unconscious bias for a reason. People are not even aware that they have it. And you can have unconscious bias for so many things.
No,
yeah?
So I don't know. For me, it's also fed by the media.
Yeah.
He spoke about the French from the West Indies, but if you look at, I forgot who it was. It's in Haiti. This guy wrote an entire paper explaining that the media doesn't want to portray or to attract viewers will always show things which
in
are
a negative way.
Different, not necessarily in a negative way, but very different from what you experience. So no one wants to do a documentary on you or on me. No offense. They want things which are different from what they're living at home.
Huh.
Right. So our life is a normal life, and they don't want to see normal life. They want to see people struggling, or people experiencing exactly the jet set and all of that. So that's what viewers want to see. So that's what the media is feeding them. So now when you sit in France, you can see documentaries after documentaries on India, which is always as a poor India or extremely rich India.
What about the middle India?
Yeah, the middle India is the majority of India in the end, but all the metro life and you being stuck in traffic, going to work, coming back, having a normal life in a clean house and all of that, no one to see.
Nobody wants.
They want to see dirty streets. They want to see wires, electrical wires all over the place. The kind of things which is different from you is what they will sit and watch. So that's more.
And I think that the reason people have so many prejudicial views towards India is because they allow the media, films, hearsay, or just borrowed cheap ideas to become the narrative for them. And that is very, very sad because, look, I think that, of course, India is different. I don't think any Indian on earth would ever dispute that. But that doesn't mean that it is a place that is any less incredible or full of wonder. Surely it has its problems. And again, I don't think any Indian would ever not admit to the problems that the country has, but to be completely one-sided, which is often the case with non-Indian views vis-a-vis the country, it's sad. And it's just straight up lame that in the 21st century where we have access to so much information and we have greater ability to travel, that people don't debunk those unfortunately prejudicial views. So I think that's one of the reasons.
This YouTuber guy, Bold and Bankrupt, very large travel YouTuber, recently went to India, and most of the time he's positive about the countries. But for India, he was like quite negative, and that was a lot of backlash. But I think the problem is if you just walk in the streets and you have this pedestrian view, not understanding the complexity of things, not the history, then it's kind of easy to start judging and like saying like, oh, what's going on, why it's working this way. So any advice for, let's say, for foreigners, how to understand that complex country as India?
Anywhere you go in the world, you have to be a sponge. You have to be willing to soak in what's there without judgment, And I think the one thing that we all spend so much time forgetting, we don't even spend any time forgetting because we just forget it straight up, which is empathy, right? Like, what is empathy? I think that, that is one thing and one characteristic or one quality or one emotion that the world can use a lot more of right now is empathy. No one's asking you to like everything. No one's asking you to enjoy everything. No one's asking you to even understand everything, but at least take out the time to recognize that someone else's journey isn't yours. And that person got there through a series of events and circumstances and experiences that belong to them. And those moments are their life, and they're as important to them as yours is to you. But we are so quick to judge. We are so quick to paint people with a brush that is very black or white. It's very monochrome. And the world is not monochrome. I mean, I know that here I am sitting behind all these black and white photos here at my studio of my actors, but life is gray. Life is gray. And I think that the more we embrace that incredible infinite number of shades of gray, the more empathetic we become. That's just my very, very, very humble view. And again, I'm sure the comments will light up with 1,000 thoughts on that. But ultimately, I think that if you're coming to India, you're coming to an ancient place that has existed as long as history itself, but also exists in its own right. And much like your own society, it's unapologetic about what it is. And it doesn't have to apologize or make a allowance for you. You need to recognize that you're here and you need to be a little patient with that. And it's going to challenge you. But isn't that why you're coming? Isn't that why you travel? Isn't why you do anything to learn? If you're doing something just because it fits into your everyday and it feels comfortable, then, and that's fine. That's okay. If that's who you are, if you want to live that life, if you're happy with your everyday, then don't challenge yourself. But if you do choose to challenge yourself, be open-minded to it. India can be a dangerous, wild place, and you got to be careful, and you got to be a little bit sensitive to your whereabouts, have some street smarts, of course, especially if you're a young woman traveling on your own or a group of young women. You need to be safe. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's all music and candy canes, because it isn't, okay? But I'm from New York City. I mean, I wouldn't tell you to walk around certain parts of New York City in any hour of the day. You got to be smart, right? You know, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, you know, I didn't go to certain neighborhoods.
I agree with that. I'm from a much smaller city in France, and I would never say, "Hey, why don't you go?" No, even in that city, why would you walk on your own all at night? I mean,
yeah, I have said it before. As a woman, I feel very comfortable here. I've traveled alone. I've traveled with my children by myself, like without my husband. I have traveled, you know, obviously with my husband, with my kids.
Always aware.
You need to be aware. You need to be aware of your surroundings.
That's the same case
it's anywhere. Any place. If you are, you know, you just, I don't think it's anything any more here than you would do anywhere else. You do your due diligence. You don't go into areas that you're not familiar with. You don't go, you know, you just don't do stupid stuff. Yeah. I mean, and I would not do that, you know, either in New York or Paris or San Francisco, or, you know, any big city.
Yeah, and
you know?
It's funny. The only time I wasn't aware of my surrounding was in South Africa and in Durban. I was walking with my parents, and they were visiting me. And I don't know, we got engrossed into a conversation, and I knew where we were going, but wasn't really familiar with the place. So I just took a straight, and then suddenly in the conversation with my mom, no, a little girl passed, and she said, "This is not safe."
Oh, she said that to you?
Yeah, and she was like 10. So I looked around, and I told my parents, first left, main road. We took the first left, went back to the main road, and yeah, it was a very unsafe place. There were prostitutes on the street with red lights and all of that. Really not a place. But I didn't realize because I wasn't aware of my surroundings. And that's one of the only time I wasn't.
Yeah. So you just need to be aware. As a woman, India is a very safe place. I have felt there are issues here for certain. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I know that there is a lot of you know, attacks on women and things like that. But I really think that, you know, if you are aware of where your surroundings, that you're not doing something that you wouldn't do somewhere else, that you can be safe here too. So, yeah.
Neighborhoods at a certain time of the day, not because I didn't feel like I wouldn't be welcomed, but because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe, and that was the truth. And I mean, if you know something's not safe, you got to be a little smart about that, right? You know, you can't expect the will of the world to change to your demands. That's naive.
If you spend like 10 plus years in the US or in Europe, in most of the cases, you become a citizen of the place, of the particular country. Like, how would you call yourself? You are like expat or immigrant or foreigner, or you're like pretty localized? How would you define it?
Before he answers, I'm going to answer this question. What do you consider yourself as? I'll answer. When people ask me, I tell them I'm an immigrant because that is what I am. I am no longer an expat, and my husband actually hates that word. He thinks that expat, the word expat is generally used for white foreigners.
Immigrants.
Well, yeah, that are
for white immigrants.
For white immigrants only, and that when Indians do the same thing and they go over to the U.S., they're considered immigrants. They're not looked at as being expats, and I can see why he thinks that. I am definitely not an expat. I am an immigrant. I have been here for now, a long time. Is it 18 or 19 years? I think it's 19 years now. So I can't do math either. I'm also
American. I think we said 19.
19. So I'm definitely an immigrant, and I consider myself as an immigrant. That's how I would define myself.
Yourself. Expat, as far as I know, is somebody who's sent here by a company, and the company is picking up the tab on everything from the school for the kid to the house to the car, that kind of thing. Immigrant, of course, is someone who comes and sets up a life, and I'm not really sure what's in between that, but I'm sure there are many. If you're being strict about definitions, I fall under the immigrant category. I came here on my own volition, of my own will, set up a business, set up a life. The company that I run is an Indian company. Yes, of course, it now keeps me here, but it didn't send me here. Everything is kind of on my own. And it's interesting, so that word immigrant has a lot of connotation attached to it today, especially in certain parts of the world. And, I live as an immigrant, and I can really empathize with the struggles that immigrants have. Now, of course, I'm someone who has a university education, and I definitely come from what would be considered a middle class, even privileged background. And I fully recognize that my journey cannot be compared to that of someone who comes from a much lesser means, and I understand their struggle is infinitely more challenging than mine. But, in terms of not having any family here, in terms of not having anybody to call who can hook me up with some information really easily, or I don't know, have a cousin or a cousin who works in a certain administration to get something done. I don't have any of that. I've done it all on my own. And that's been an interesting ride because, I've had the opportunity to see the Indian Administrative Services up close and personal. And, it works. And I know that, we always get lots of comments in our chats, and they're always very, very heartwarming. So a big shout out to everybody who makes the comments. Thank you. But people always think that I'm just being nice. But actually, I got to tell you, the Indian Administrative Services, I've dealt with the FRROO office, which is the Foreign Registration Office, a few times. It's been pretty straightforward. It's been pretty easy stuff. As long as you show up with the papers you need to have, the signatures you need to have, you're pretty well sorted out. Actually, people are going to kind of roll their eyes at this, but the most difficult and challenging immigration situation I ever went through was in the U.S. That was really hard because, my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time with my son, we had to deal with some paperwork stuff, and that was really challenging. They made that hard on us, and they made us, and they did something that I never experienced in France because I lived there, as you know, for a long time. I never experienced here in India. In the U.S., they made me feel like a foreigner. They made us feel like, we were asking for something special, like, the right to be in America. And I kind of wanted to remind the guys a few times, fellas, everybody in this country is kind of from somewhere, we all have a story. So maybe a little, take the attitude off a little bit. But there was a real kind of we're America. And I was just okay, if that's how you feel about it,
So I actually had a, similar situation here in India where as an American citizen, I had to get some documentation for my American son. And because my husband lost his social security number, and they have really made it difficult to get any type of documentation out of the US. And it was a huge process for me, and it was not easy. It was very challenging. It took 10 months, and it took a very complicated process. So, I've also dealt with the FRRO, which I'm assuming you have as well. Has it been a bit of a challenge? Yes, some of it has been, but for the most part, it hasn't been, any more difficult than I think anywhere else. You go with your paperwork, you make sure you have your paperwork, you maybe have to call and, just verify that you have all the documentation, and, you are patient. I have said, many times, I don't know if I've said on the channel, but my way of working with administrative anything, anywhere, any country, is to kill them with kindness, because it's much more difficult to be rude or unhelpful to someone who is acting like a bitch. You know what I mean? And like an entitled foreigner. So I really do my best to just be patient and kind and have a little bit of empathy for the people working in those offices. Long hours, and a lot of times with,
they see a lot.
Yeah, they're working with a lot of different people, and I've never had a problem. So you get more flies with honey, basically.
And of course, you find yourself like apologizing to people because you're American. You're like, I'm so sorry. There was a little chauvinism in it that was surprising to me, where in other places I haven't experienced that.
What do you feel when you are on the US soil, and then when you go back to India? How do you feel?
There were things that's funny, because like actually it's very, very beautiful and incredibly gracious. But Indians, because I've lived here for so long now, sometimes they'll like sort of passively just be like, oh, Jeff, you're one of us now, right? And I never really get that until actually I'm out of India and I realize how accustomed to living in India I am, how accustomed to the food and the flavors, the people, the spaces and places, the way life moves. You realize how accustomed and how conditioned you become to a place when you're out of it. So, and actually I do feel that when I'm in the US. I feel like, wow, I really haven't lived here in a long time, and I don't really get everything about how it's done, or, for instance, like one thing that I'm terrible at is Americans are pretty good at being on time. If they tell you 1 o'clock, they probably mean 1 o'clock, where, I'm, 1:15, 1:20.
How do you feel when you go back to France? Do you feel any less French? Because I have to say I don't feel less American when I go home. I do feel a little bit more maybe behind on certain things and certain issues that come up, because the news and things that I kind of see every day is Indian news, and I don't necessarily keep track of all the news that's going on in the US, and more specifically really local news that might be from the area where I'm from. So I do feel a little bit behind in that respect. But when I go home, I am still very comfortable there. I don't feel uncomfortable at all. I do have to say, and I think I said it in the video or the interview with Max, is that I like to come back to India, because when I am home, it feels like I'm working all the time. Like I'm doing all of the chores. I'm doing all of that unpaid work that we talked about in the last video. Whereas here in India, I do have a housekeeper, and I have a little bit more room to, have some time for myself, whereas in the US, I definitely don't. So how do you feel when you go back to France?
Fine.
Fine?
No,
so good.
No, I was just thinking of what he said, and I think that, yes, my husband keeps on saying that I am more Indian than him. I don't think that's true. But definitely been influenced by India. And if I was in France, if I had stayed in France, I would have been completely different. And my daughter is in France right now, and I can see the change. How she, how she's being influenced by the surroundings she's in. So yeah, I think I don't necessarily feel not French when I'm in France, a little disconnected.
Maybe just a bit disconnected.
Maybe, yeah. But definitely, I know that I am not who I would have been if I had stayed.
If you had stayed. Interesting, yeah. And I never really thought about that. I'm a different person.
Yeah.
Because I have lived here. Yeah. It's an interesting thought, Laurence.
Thank you.
Deep.
But I've learned the trick with Americans is that if you message them when you're on your way, even if you're running late, you say, I'm on my way, they know you're coming. So they don't start to have some sort of like, panic attack.
I also have to say, I never am late, generally speaking. Like I'm still, even in India, I'm still on time. I never picked up this habit of being late. What about you? No, you didn't.
With you, I'm frequently 5-10 minutes late.
Well, that's not late, but
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Otherwise
like,
I'm on time.
We're on time. We're on time for work. We're on time for our meetings. Like, I grew up with an early is on time and on time is late philosophy in a lot of my classes and things for school. So this is something that's ingrained in me, and I have not become late.
Yeah, no.
That you're not coming, you know, it's just, I'm coming, I'm just going to be a few minutes late, but I'm on my way. I know I have to be there, you know, let me reassure you. So yeah.
How's it in India? Any tricks how it works in India?
Show up. I mean, that's it. Just show up. You know, I mean, of course, but actually that trick of on my way is something I even use here, you know, because traffic can be a little bonkers here in Mumbai. One always needs to sort of just kind of let people know that at least you're on the way. I think that's a polite thing to do because you can't always guarantee 100% that you're going to be on time because it's not always in your control. As a matter of fact, the monsoon is leaving us now, and it's leaving us not just in terms of the fact that the rains are stopping, thunder and lightning, but also the roads, you know, there's a lot of potholes everywhere. So, you know, even like, because I have a bike, you know, we've talked about that. Like, you know, when I'm going up and down the road, I gotta have to do some of these and some of these and some of these, some of those, you know, and you can't always guarantee that you're going to be on time because you're not really in control of how well paved the road might be or it might not be.
Is there anything that as a Westerner, as an American, you can't do in India? Or, I don't know, some maybe social circles that you never would join being a foreigner or being an immigrant in this country?
India's social hierarchy is very complicated and can be at times very rigid for people in that hierarchy, meaning the socioeconomic hierarchy. And of course, unfortunately, we still have a caste hierarchy here in India. And it can be very, very complicated and a very delicate matter for people to deal with. But as a expat or immigrant foreigner, I don't have to deal with that because I'm out of the system. I'm not part of the hierarchy. I'm a foreign element. So people from all walks of life, from those who you would consider at sort of the elite levels down to the more, you know, lower levels, everyone's very welcoming and very, very loving and very open-minded. So there is a sort of open invitation when it comes to the social hierarchy in that regard. But there...
Unless you're going to marry one. That was a joke that I heard initially, like 25 years ago. How about Indian men will look for a woman in the same area, same, you know, caste, sort of say, the same city, same area. If they can't find an acceptable girl, they will look for same caste, maybe different city, same caste, then different region. Then maybe just same caste, you know, and then just go for then maybe, you know, outside, you know, that's fine, you know, go outside the religion. But then the foreigner is always like the
last choice.
Last choice. Sorry.
There's also a degree of, I wouldn't say it's closed off. Indians don't assume that you know anything about their culture or their country because they're so used to people being ignorant of it in a way that is diminishing and demeaning. And they're always very pleasantly surprised and extremely welcoming of those who have learned about it. So at first, people could be a little, when it comes to certain topics, be a little standoffish. But the minute they know that you have taken out the time to get to know their culture and appreciate their culture and even maybe celebrate their culture, they love that. They absolutely love that. They're extremely welcoming. So it's kind of a complicated thing because at times you're in and other times you're kind of out, and it's something you kind of have to learn how to judge. But I don't think any culture in the world is necessarily terribly different because, look, I mean, cultures are something that people will hold very dearly because they help define who they are in a very essential way.
Last time you recommended the set of films, the movies.
Oh, sure.
That people can watch to have a taste of what real Indian cinema is. Can you recommend a book, something that's maybe not so complicated, something entry-level book for people, for foreigners who want to, maybe that can spark the interest about India and explain like few things about the country?
Luckily, there is an unbelievable amount of books one can read about India, and some of them are absolutely brilliant. There are two books about Mumbai that were written relatively close to each other. One of them is called Shanataram, which actually went on to become an Apple Plus TV show, and the other one is called Maximum City. Of the two, I have to say I'm a little bit more a fan of Maximum City. I think Maximum City is a much more honest lens of Mumbai at that time in the early thousands. Gary David Roberts' Shantaram, I feel, is not great. I didn't enjoy the book at all, actually.
I have started
900 pages, people. It's 900 pages. And I stopped at 560. I never finished it.
I started and stopped and I think I only got to like chapter 3 or something like that. Like I'm not even
I went much further in the story, and I don't know, I left it thinking, oh, let me read this book instead, and I never went back. It's been years, I don't know, 6-7 years.
Have you heard of this Maximum City?
No, I haven't.
I didn't like it even one bit. I know a lot of people love it, but I just felt it was I just didn't connect with it. Maximum City I quite liked, and I felt it was very real. Mumbai, the city, has changed an enormous amount since Maximum City. Sakutu Mehta wrote that book. It's changed a huge amount since then, but nonetheless, I think that some of the things that you kind of get a flavor for in the book are still kind of true here. So that's a book I would say check out, Maximum City. It's a great book. But I mean, look, the first book I ever read about India was Gandhi's book, My Experiments with Truth. And again, it's really interesting because that book feels very antiquated, or it doesn't really apply to certainly modern metropolitan tier 1, fast moving, expensive India. But, at the same time, there's an India in the village, right? There are the village Indians, and there are agricultural Indians, and so many of the people in this country still live that way, the vast majority actually. And those values and ideals are actually not that antiquated. They still sort of do exist on that level. Certainly things have evolved, no doubt. That goes without saying. A lot of the things that was set up in the Gandhian philosophy still kind of remain true in other parts of the country. And that's, of course, a very divisive statement because a lot of people, Gandhi's legacy is something that's debated a great deal, and his economic and political thinking is something that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about. I would just say that, I think that it depends on what lens you want to see the country through.
To reach out. What's the biggest lesson that you learned in India? Or let's put it this way, India taught you?
Patience. I am not by nature a really patient person. It's not a characteristic that I was naturally displaying throughout my life. Let's put it that way.
So you are the same? Patience?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely? Interesting. I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's weird, but I can't, I'm trying to think, how it's impacted me. I'm sure it has. Maybe I don't know. Interesting. I'll come back to that.
But India has taught me to be patient. It is not, and I don't mean that I'm waiting in the road or stuck in traffic. What I mean is that life has a different rhythm. And we kind of jokingly spoke about IST, Indian Suggested Time, once before. Yeah. India has taught me to be patient, and has taught me, especially about my career as a filmmaker, to really kind of take my time, to recognize the importance of taking my time and the value of taking my time. And that's been a very, very, very humbling lesson, which is actually the second characteristic or thing that the country has taught me, is humility. In the West, we spend so much time obsessed with the idea of ourself, and we spend so much time trying to nurture our individuality and our ego. And that does not necessarily mean that it doesn't exist in the East or certainly in India. But there is a stream of thought, and there is a stream of consciousness and a very real narrative about how individualism can be very deeply destructive, and how your ego can be something that consumes you to the point of self-destruction. And as a filmmaker, as a writer, actor in that sphere, you spend a lot of time swimming in waters that are not humble, and you are around people who are not humble. And I'm very grateful to the fact that, for whatever reason, albeit the philosophy the religious texts, the people, the travel I've had, the interactions I've had, I've learned to be a lot more humble and recognize that I'm part of a much bigger thing. And that is a beautiful, very satisfying feeling for me. So I'd say humility and patience.
That's really interesting. I was trying to actually think while he was talking about what it is that I have, you know, taken away from India. And maybe it is patience, but I'm looking at it more as like just acceptance, or like just to be able to let things flow, you know?
Go with the flow.
Yeah, go with the flow. Just,
yeah, that's patience.
Is it patience?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe it is. You know, that sometimes you need to wait and sometimes you need to hurry. And, you know, I think I know I experienced this when I was in Prayagraj for the Kumbh Mela. As an older woman that has been now living in India for a long time, I think my experience there would have been much different if I was 25 versus 45. Yeah. And I think that I would have been, my experience would have been just way different in a much more negative way. I had such a positive experience there because I just went with the flow and I just took things as they came. I didn't get up, you know, like I just, you know, I just went with the flow. And I don't think I would have been able to have done that 20 years ago. So I guess that's what I have taken away from India. And that's a good thing to have. So excellent. Do you have anything else you'd want to say about this?
No, I really like this man. If he comes to Bangalore, we can have a drink because he's quite nice.
Yeah, he is nice.
Please,
Mr. Goldberg, you want to have a drink when you come to Bangalore from Mumbai? Excellent. It was
I really
nice.
love everything he said.
Yeah.
I mean, it's matching pretty much what I think. So.
Well, I don't agree with the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah, I need to see that. I'm not sure.
The movie was like 40 years ago, so it's obvious that we are all like the same age.
So you know, it's funny because there is a French movie which is coming out in 2 or 3 weeks. It's about delocalization and how a company in France is moving from suddenly into Calcutta.
Okay.
And this guy, he's coming to Calcutta for to run the thing. And the way it's done is, for the trailer which I have seen, is mostly stereotypes.
Okay.
A lot. And I showed it to my husband and he was like, oh, I'm not sure it's going to make it out to India. And I said, I think it's better.
If it doesn't,
because it really looks like it's
something like
those
that.
Stereotypes are still there, and
it's unfortunate because that, you know, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones, it was a long time ago, and I do have to say movies are movies, but if something is coming out,
I'll tell you once I
thing.
have seen it. I haven't seen it. I just saw the
review
trailer.
on that. Okay. Excellent. Well, that's our reaction, people. If you like it, please give a like. Please give your subscribe. If you'd like to see us react to something else, please put it in the comments. And as always, we love you and bye-bye.
Bye.